So today's gospel lesson is sort of a weird gospel lesson. If you try to take it literally, I think you're really headed down a dead end. Because if you take it literally, it would seem to promote a economic system that we know does not work. Because, well, on day one, the owner might have gotten away with this. On day two, everyone's going to show up 1 minute before the whistle to collect their checks. And it will be everybody, and it's going to be that way day 3, 4, 5, and 12 months later. Because once you do this once, human nature is going to dictate, I want as much money for as little work as humanly possible. So I think going down the literal road is basically going into a cul-de-sac of theology. So I think it's really clear on this one that this is a parable, that this is an sort of allegory or metaphor for life, for spirituality, which then begs the question, what the heck is it trying to get at? And I think it's really digging into a really dangerous thing and a really easy thing for Christians to get involved in, and that is self-righteousness. And self-righteousness is really dangerous. It can really tear apart people, families, communities. But heck, it doesn't even happen to happen within a religious context. I've seen self-righteousness be horrible for a corporate workplace, right? We've all known that guy here just like, oh, he's talking again, right? And what we see in this is an important message about self-righteousness. And the message is this. When it comes to salvation, God's gift is free. He doesn't care when you showed up, or how you looked, or where you came from, or who you are, or you being part of the right whatever. God's grace is free. God's love is unbounding. God's love and grace and charity and compassion is limitless. So when it comes to salvation, God doesn't care if you've been there since 8 a.m. or if you've been there for the last 2 seconds, you are in. Because God has many rooms and they're there for you. And you would think to yourself, man, that is amazingly good news. That is awesome. How could anyone not like to hear that? And I'll tell you, there's a whole crew of folks who don't want to hear that. And those folks are not people who are not faithful. In fact, often this is one of those sort of perversions or sins or whatever you want to call it of good, sort of perversion of good thing or a sin that often travels around the best of people. Because what happens is exactly what you see in the text. They're like, hey, this is not okay. This is not fair. I have been working my whole life for salvation, and this yahoo shows up 2 seconds later and he's in heaven with me? Come on! Or he's in church with me? Or he's on, he's in some board with me? Or he's gotten promoted to the same level I have at my company with me? Who the heck is this guy? When you go there, that's self-righteousness. Because, as the owner of the vineyard explained, you were happy with the deal when I offered it to you. Why are you unhappy just because I offered a different deal to somebody else? Honestly, it's a brilliant answer, but it's also an answer that just makes me mad on the inside. Because I get where those folks who fell to self-righteousness are coming from. The hardest sort of sins to avoid are those that are wrapped in virtue. Those sins that are hardest to sidestep are those you don't even realize. They're the ones that convince you that you're the hero of a story. Well, the rest of the world knows you're the villain. That's why I like Marvel Comics, right? If you look at the actual villains, like if you look at X-Men, you look at Magneto in his own world is the hero of his story, and he, for the life of him, cannot understand why Dr. Xavier and the X-Men will not get on board. Or any number of other sort of Marvel characters out there. Marvel does this insanely good job of doing these sort of anti-heroes, or villains that believe they're heroes. And I truly believe that the most seductive sins are those that do the exact same thing. And they're also so hard to fight because when you talk to the person in their world, They're being heroic. What does it look like? Well, what it looks like is this, is that the person starts off in a virtuous place. Self-righteousness feeds and actually sort of wraps around a virtuous reality. And the virtuous reality is the reality of wisdom and the reality of experience, right? Like, longer you've walked the walk, longer you have walked with Christ, longer you have existed in a company, longer you have done whatever it is you're doing, the more wisdom and common sense and sort of instinct and, insight you develop, right? And we've all lived through, again, whether or not it's the church or family or company or factory, we've all lived through the scenario where the new guy shows up and is like, well, I just graduated last week from college and just want to tell you all, you're doing everything wrong. Right? We've all met that guy. And if you've been there for 20 years, you're sort of like, yeah, be here for a decade and then I'll listen to you. Because I'm feeling like I've met 1,000 of you who just walked up and knows how to fix the world just like I did when I was your age or in your position or your education or whatever it is. Right? And there is a truth there, right? There is a virtuous thing there because on one level, wisdom, it's important. Gut instinct, it's invaluable. Experience, it's insanely important. And you should step back and say, the person who's done this for 20 years probably knows something more than the guy who's been here for 2 seconds, if we don't know what to do. But if that person who's been there for 20 years won't even hear the person who's been there for 5 seconds and responds with, learn your place, put in your time, and then I'll listen to you, you've gone from a place of wisdom to a place of self-righteousness. Because, wisdom and experience and all that's super valuable. And that person who's new should listen to you. You can't just assume that new is wrong, because sometimes new is right. Just like you can't assume old is wrong, because sometimes old is right. See, the difference between acting out of wisdom and acting out of self-righteousness is whether or not you're listening to the other person, whether or not you value the other person, whether or not you actually take time to get to know the other person. And all those things are really hard, especially if you start off assuming the other person's wrong. See, that's what makes self-righteousness so hard to shake, so hard to get rid of, so hard to sidestep. So take a few minutes this week in your prayer life. If you don't have prayer life, get a prayer life. It's really awesome. And ask yourself, is there any place in my life where I'm acting out of self-righteousness, even if I think it's wisdom?